Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane, and it's the morning of Friday, the 29th of March, 2019. And of course, this should be a day that absolutely goes down in history as the day in which the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland extricated itself from the clutches of the EU, of a corporatist regime that pretends that it's democratic but is anything but. And if you want any sport, then all you need to do is basically go and speak with anyone who purports that we need to remain in the EU and ask them how the EU legislative process works and how that legislation then filters its way onto the statute books of the UK, and they basically cannot explain it. They have no idea. So Stockholm Syndrome is certainly gripping probably something in the region of about 40% of the country. But that's okay, because there's at least probably 60% plus now who know that getting out of the EU is absolutely crucial if this country is going to have any real chance of self-determination, of re-establishing sovereignty. Now, we're not out of, even then, we wouldn't be out of the woods, because obviously we have British socio-psychopaths who will see this as an opportunity to implement unfettered corporatism. And of course, the US lobbyists are already circling around Westminster in a bid to attempt to get the UK to lower all standards to come in line with the US, where of course the corporation is absolute king. No secret about it at all there, no pretense. And basically the population of the US are simply slaves on the plantation. And we're not far behind here, but there is still the opportunity to take responsibility and recover that situation. But at least we would have the chance to do that, which we certainly don't have as part of the EU. So obviously, we should be celebrating coming out of the EU, escaping effectively a government in occupation, and celebrating this newfound independence. But that isn't going to be the case, it seems, thanks to either massively incompetent government or simply actors who really didn't necessarily understand or even read the script. And so, where we're at right now is actually potentially by design. But nonetheless, the chaos that has been created presents an opportunity, and that law of unintended consequences has an opportunity to kick in. So what's going to happen today? Well, sadly, the likelihood is that after 11 o'clock tonight, the UK will still be part of the EU. And of course, it's perhaps entirely coincidental, perhaps not, that there's going to be a massive influx of foreign troops into this country over the weekend. So if there was to be massive civil disobedience, then there are troops on tap who could, of course, very quickly be putting on British police uniforms and attempting to quell trouble in the streets. Well, I think the British public are a little bit more subtle than that, and they're not going to create a situation that brings about martial law. But nonetheless, from 11 o'clock tonight, if we are not out of the EU, then there would be absolute legitimacy for people withholding taxation payments in any way, shape or form. And it will be the time for creativity to establish the fact that the government is there to represent the will of the people and not the will of the corporations. Now, the reality is that the vast majority of the global corporatists believe that the population of the UK is so dumbed down that come 11 o'clock tonight, the average Brit is going to go, oh well, what a shame, never mind, we got close, but no cigar. Well, if the global corporatists think that the people of this country are simply going to roll over and accept the incompetence that has ensued since June of 2016, then I think they're in for a big surprise. So what could happen today is a decision either to leave the EU on May the 22nd with a deal, which will be a treaty. Let's understand it. What Theresa May has effectively negotiated is a treaty with the EU, which basically means that this country would still be part of the EU, but without any representation. Not that we really had it anyway, but nonetheless, it would be de facto that the UK would be a vassal state thanks to the Theresa May treaty. So the better solution all around is to leave on April the 12th with no deal. And that, of course, then puts the onus on the negotiators to work from that basis. Now, sadly, what has been clearly demonstrated is that the UK has a complete lack of political statesmen or stateswomen. What we have is simply journeymen, and that is epitomised by the likes of Gavin Williamson, who is Minister for Battleships in the Bath, because that's all he has the competence to manage. And yet, this boy with zero political skill, with zero presentation skill, is trotted out with a script to pretend to be Britain's Ministry of Defence. And unfortunately, as we go through the people who sit on the front bench today, there's not too much difference than what we see with Gavin Williamson. So, we have it all to play for, and we need a general election, and, of course, it'll still be just more of the same. And then we need the people of this country to actually bring about their creativity to find an alternative form of government which truly represents the will of the people and is determined to find a way to eradicate poverty, to eradicate the homelessness in this country, to eradicate child poverty, to eradicate unemployment, and to create a situation where everybody effectively has the opportunity to enjoy what might be labelled a middle-class lifestyle. But there are some fundamentals here, and of course, number one is a complete revamp of the financial system. And of course, the reality is that we know within the British Parliament, there are very, very few parliamentarians that actually understand how the financial system functions, how the private banks control the issuance of currency, and how they keep countries effectively in austerity by loaning that money back to the governments. And the Tories, let's understand that when the Tories came to office, the national debt owed to private banks was reportedly just under £800 billion. And after nearly 9 years of Tory austerity, where we've seen massive increases in poverty, massive increases in homelessness, and somehow the Tories have managed to increase the debt from just shy of 800 billion to 2 trillion. So they've increased the debt to private banksters by effectively 150%. And basically, very few people understand how that's occurred or the implications of it, or, of course, how to redress it. And that's exactly the way the banksters like it. So we need to start educating ourselves and then educating the politicians and holding their feet to the fire and getting them to see a way through this global corporatist control. So who knows what's going to happen? Let's hope that, to use the media phrase, the UK comes crashing out of the EU with no deal on April the 12th. Of course, it won't be a crash. This is all part of the fear porn that's put out there. And, basically any large company that doesn't have a strategy in place for dealing with whatever form of exit from the EU, then more fool them. And once again, it would simply show the level of incompetence within the British industrial commercial complex. So, it's no wonder that people regard the UK as the political laughingstock of the world right now. But, maybe that's a process of transition. Maybe that's something that we have to go through to bring about something that is truly meaningful. And, I know a lot of people say, oh, no, that's just a pipe dream. Well, yes, so it might be. But if you don't have a vision, if you don't have a desire to improve the current situation, then guess what? It's going to continue or potentially get worse. Exactly as I predicted in my AV7 presentation some 6 weeks before the referendum, where I said that the game plan would be to use the opportunity to take Britain out of the EU and then destroy the economy, destroy the culture, so that people would be gagging to get back into the EU, at which point, of course, the nation state would effectively cease to exist in any form whatsoever, even by name. So, obviously the establishment hopes everybody just goes, oh no, not more Brexit, and wants to stick their head in the sand. But you know what? It's an opportunity to actually participate in the process. And, if all you're going to do is moan and whinge about the situation, then, you are going to end up with not just more of the same, but something that's a lot worse. So, basically, it's a clarion call. It's time to get involved. Meanwhile, of course, life does go on. And, of course, I'm in the middle of coming towards the end now of a sort of hectic week here. And, we had an amazing turnout of people at the Royal Station Hotel at Newcastle. And I absolutely have to take my hat off to Dave, the night porter at the Royal Station Hotel in Newcastle, because, we set the room out with about 60 odd chairs. And Dave was bringing chairs to the room to accommodate the latecomers, for the next half hour. And eventually the room was absolutely rammed with about 80 plus people and people standing outside. And so the level of interest in what's unfolding with smart meters, with 5G, and the effects of this pernicious technology is certainly ramping up. And yesterday Mark had so much support at Newcastle Crown Court for his appeal against his criminal conviction for harassment of Gateshead councillors, because he's trying to get them to answer the hard questions, that unfortunately every seat in the public gallery was taken about 3 times over. That case continues today, so if you have the opportunity to go along and see Mark take the witness stand and be subjected to cross-examination as well, and then hopefully sometime probably after lunch the judge, the recorder, sitting with 2 magistrates there, will make their decision and issue their verdict as to whether Mark's conviction is upheld or whether his appeal has been successful. And of course he's not out of the woods, because then Gateshead Council are still seeking to jail him because they have initiated committal proceedings for alleged breach of the injunction put in place, just simply demanding that he behave himself and act with appropriate demeanour. But Gateshead Council have decided that a couple of phone calls and a conversation with the Gateshead Council solicitor, in which Mark once again asking the hard questions, is tantamount to breach of that injunction. So, of course, all this is really good in many respects because it's helping to highlight the concerns over 5G technology. So, if you're in the northeast of England, get yourself down to Newcastle at Crown Court today to see the final stages of this hearing. And of course, yesterday, of course, I hot-footed it down to London and was supporting Lynn Tyre, along with some 40 plus other people who had come at very short notice from all across the southeast of England to support Lynn challenge the attempt to extradite her to France. And unfortunately, obviously Lynn was all geared up for a verdict, but yet again that has been deferred, and the judge has said that he wants to consider all the evidence that's been presented before he issues his written judgment. And if you want to see the update on that, then look at the previous video to this on my YouTube channel, and you'll see my discussion with Lynn after we came out of the courts at in London at lunchtime yesterday. And the news on David Noakes is that he's still not released. Of course, his earliest release date was last Friday, and reportedly it's purely down to poor administration within the prison and probation services and getting his tag sorted out. But I think we can safely say that after a week there is more than incompetence at work here. And David is not in great health, and the first place that David will be going once he does come out is to see a doctor, and to try and work a protocol for dealing with the quite significant medical trauma that he's experiencing right now. So our thoughts are very much with David and Lynn as the pressure on them piles, because as soon as David comes out of jail, then the French government are going to initiate the extradition proceedings so that David has to yet again face more charges. But of course, if they are extradited to France, then they will be held on remand in a French jail. And I think that both David and Lynn have some very, very real concerns that if that's the case and they're held on remand in a French jail for anything up to 2 years, then there's a very strong probability that they won't actually survive. So it's truly important that these two people who have been instrumental in getting GC-MAF into the public awareness, and of course, this GC-MAF has been proven to be an extremely effective treatment for a lot more than just cancer. And Big Pharma is absolutely desperate to make sure that GC-MAF is eradicated from the vocabulary of anyone who has any cause to research cancer treatments, such as the sociopathic nature of the corporatocracy. Well, finally, my week will end with a trip to southwest Wales, and this evening I shall be speaking and addressing the issue of 5G and smart meters, and sharing the evidence, the increasing evidence, which would indicate that there are some very, very significant and genuine concerns over the negative health impacts of this technology. So if you're in southwest Wales and you can find your way to St Dogmael's Community Hall, it's just a couple of miles to the west of the centre of Cardigan in southwest Wales, then that will start this evening at 7 o'clock. I think it's about a 5-hour drive for me from Lancashire, and although I was seriously tempted to stay in Newcastle last night, the reality is that the drive would have been some 6.5, 7 hours from Newcastle, and it just wasn't a viable proposition. So I'm part way there. So to those of you in southwest Wales, central Wales, who have some concerns about 5G, I look forward to seeing you this evening at St Dogmael's Community Hall. Now, just a heads up, so that when I make this statement on Monday, people don't take it as an April Fool's joke. Monday will actually be my last morning live stream for a period of probably about 4 weeks. Obviously, we have AV10 coming up, and I have a lot of work that I need to do in the preparation for AV10, which I sense is going to be quite possibly the most significant and important and constructive AV event today. But I also have some other things that I need to take care of, so I've decided that the most appropriate way to do this is just to go dark, as it were, for a few weeks. I'll still be contributing on social media in some way, shape or form, but I won't be back with the morning live streams after Monday until the back end of April. So I will be back with you at 8:30 on Monday morning, when sadly I will probably have to acknowledge that we are still not fully extricated from the EU, and we'll see how things unfold over this weekend. And it would not surprise me one iota if the British public uses the opportunity this weekend to demonstrate the magnitude of their frustration with incompetent government and incompetent leadership, and shows their displeasure at still being in the clutches of the EU after the specified time of leaving, i.e. 11 p.m. of March the 29th, 2019. So meanwhile, you have a very, very creative weekend, and I shall look forward to being back with you at 8:30 on Monday morning. You take care now.